Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I am Jim Sues, director of the New Jersey chapter of the Council for Social Justice, or CSJ, which is a project of ICNA. This webinar is presented in partnership with the Islamic Learning Foundation, or ILF, which is also a project of ICNA. We are pleased to welcome you to this webinar entitled Navigating the Palestine Crisis, Mental Health Impacts on Youth and the Path Forward. This webinar is intended to address critical issues, including your legal rights in protest, the mental health impacts of this crisis on youth, and the influence of activism on campus life. We understand the urgency and importance of these discussions, especially in today's challenging times. Your participation can contribute significantly to raising the level of awareness and fostering meaningful dialogue on these critical issues. While we're live now, this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page on an ongoing basis. So please feel free to share those links with your networks. We'd like to welcome three speakers this afternoon. Chaplain Joshua Salam of Duke University, Sister Sadia Z. Yunus, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and Sister Amy Ducre, a staff attorney at the Michigan chapter of CARE. They will each speak for approximately 20 minutes. After all three speakers have made their presentations, we will take questions from the viewers. If you have a question, you can enter it in the comments section associated with this webinar on either YouTube or Facebook. We will continue to take questions until 5 p.m. Eastern Time, inshallah. Now it's time to introduce our first speaker. I'd like to introduce Chaplain Joshua Salam. He entered the U.S. Air Force in 1995 and served as a police officer for 4 years. He was a key contributor in establishing Friday prayer services on base for Muslim military members and went on to serve as an imam in Goldsboro, North Carolina for several years. After the military, he managed the Civil Rights Department for Council on American Islamic Relations from 2000 to 2004 and helped oversee a Baltimore Muslim community and neighborhood development project from 2004 to 2007. He is currently chaplain at Duke University. Before starting at Duke in July 2018, Joshua worked with youth and families for 11 years at one of the largest Muslim communities in America. He holds a master's degree in religious studies and a doctorate of ministry from Harvard Seminary. Please welcome Chaplain Joshua Salam, who will speak to us on the influence of activism on campus life. Dr. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glory be to Him, be on all the listeners today. Thank you for joining. We begin with the name of Allah, whose mercy is infinite, His mercy is continuous. We send peace and blessings on Prophet Muhammad and his family and all the righteous people in the world. Thank you for having me today. I will try to be as brief as possible. This is such a big issue, and as far as campus communities, anyone who's been watching the news knows that young people on the college campuses have been dealing with this struggle of activism more than anyone else, I would say, at this moment in time. And I want you to think about, as I continue to talk, why that is. I personally don't think it's been fair for the young people of the Muslim community to take on this burden. I've often asked, where is my generation? The way that they're doing encampments and protests that are pretty bold, and the Muslim community is getting behind them. But sometimes I think the Muslim community should get in front of them or try to match their activism with the elected officials. But anyway, I just want you to be thinking about that as I talk about this. We're going to talk about the importance of balancing activism in your personal life. I'm going to use some stories from the Sirah and some Hadith, some concepts from the Quran. And at the end of it, I want to have an ask of you when it comes to when you leave this presentation today. The reason why I think it's important to balance activism with your personal life is because activism is stressful. It is extremely stressful. People who are activists generally are risking themselves to be arrested, paying a serious fine, getting canceled by their own community or canceled by the society at large. It could get escalated. They risk getting beaten either by onlookers, anti-protests, or police forces. In some societies, you risk being tortured, and ultimately you can risk being killed. So this is, as you can see, this is just a lot of stressful things that activists are dealing with. And on top of that, sometimes if you think about this, the story of Palestine, it's been 75 years since 1948 that and even before that, if you want to go into some other massacres and things that were happening before 1948, but there's been a long-term struggle. And I was talking to my mother the other day about when she was out protesting and early. And so some people can start to feel hopeless. When is this going to change? Is anything going to happen? So in addition to the torture, the being beaten or canceled, the things that I mentioned, there's another mental stress to it of trying to keep your sense of hope up, and think about an activist as trying to balance all of that. Now, if you don't come into activism with in a good state of mind, being grounded, having balance in your own life, you bring all of that stress and that anxiety into the activist realm. You're afraid of being arrested, hit, doxxed, as we Muslim students were being doxxed, which is when they just kind of take your face and your information and put it online, and you can't get a job, or the jobs that you had get pulled away from you. You're dealing with all of that, and you bring it into an activist community, and it causes a lot of harm. You can bring a lot of harm into a group of people trying to be active on a particular issue because of what you're dealing with. And I think maybe some other speakers will talk more about that. So there's some grace that I think needs to be thought about when we talk about this balance. We have this concept of fard kifaya, which is some things are not required on everyone in a community. Some things, as long as somebody is doing it, it's sufficient. A lot of times they use the example of the janazah prayer. Everyone doesn't have to come to a janazah prayer as long as somebody prays janazah on the person. So activism is not for everybody. It's something I think maybe everybody should support in some way, shape, or form. Maybe some people need to support financially. Maybe some people need to support logistically. A lot of times on these college campuses, people just needed water. Who's bringing the water? Is there anybody bringing sandwiches? Is there anybody sending the emails? So there's a lot of things that can be done. Not everyone has to be in front of the camera or holding the picket sign or shouting. As we've seen, sometimes people shout the wrong things. One person's comment can ruin the whole issue of a protest, or take attention away from the main focus of the protest. So we have this story in Sahih Bukhari that I think is I'd like to use to transition to my next point. There's two people in the story of Abu Darda and Salman, the companions of the Prophet. May Allah be pleased with them. And Salman is going to visit Abu Darda, and he sees his wife, and his wife isn't really dressed in nice clothes. She has like shabby clothes on. And when Salman asks her, like, why are you dressed like this? And she says, my husband doesn't really, he doesn't really care about this worldly life. His focus is on the next life. And he's like, okay. So he starts to spend some time with Abu Darda, and he encourages him to sleep, or first he offers Abu Darda offers Salman food, and he goes, no, I'm fasting. And he goes, well, I'm not going to eat unless you eat. So he breaks his fast and he eats. Then he wants to get up in the middle of the night to pray, and Salman tells him to go back to sleep. Finally, he does get up and pray. At the end of the story, there's a statement where Salman said to Abu Darda, hey, your Lord has a right on you. Your soul has a right on you. Your family has a right on you. And you should give the rights of all those who have a right on you. And then when this information came back to Rasulullah, the Prophet said Salman is correct. So there's this concept of balance that even in another story, like one of the companions was sent back home. He wanted to go and fight in a battle for the community, and the Prophet sent him back home because he said, you specifically, you should go back and take care of your mother, right? In my mind, what I learned from this is you're creating an imbalance in your effort to be activist and do good deeds and struggle and fight in the cause of Allah. You're creating imbalance. And we still have this concept in the American military today. Like you learned that I was in the military. So I'm, one of these old movies is called Saving Private Ryan. And Saving Private Ryan was about one soldier. All of his brothers was in the military, and there was like four sons. Those were all of the sons in his family, and his other three brothers passed away in the war. They were killed in the war. So the rule was, we're going to go and get him. He's going to go back to his family. We're not going to have him stay in this war because he needs to take care of his family now. So even in kind of like modern day understandings of this, there's like, yes, there's a war going on. Yes, this battle is important. Yes, we have to put all of our efforts, and whoever's available needs to come out here. But we need to be mindful of everybody's situation, and everybody needs to have some type of balance in their life. Another important reason why I think this is something that we should think about is when you get on the airplane, and I know people use this example a lot. I'm going to use it again. I apologize if you've heard it too much, but the flight attendant always gives the same announcement: put on your mask first before trying to help other people. The wisdom behind that is your heart sees your child struggling to breathe, and you want to help your child first. Or maybe it's your mother next to you, and you want to help them first. And stuff is going on, things are flying all over the place, and you're like, I got to take care of them first. But the wisdom behind it is, if you do that, you could pass out while you're trying to help them, and now both of you are struggling. So the instruction is like, put on your mask first, make sure that you can breathe, and that way you can be focused and do what you need to help the person next to you. This is going back to this concept of balance when we talk about activism. We need to ground ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves emotionally, spiritually, financially, just physically. We have to take care of ourselves before we start taking care of others. Now, I forgot, I was supposed to start with a disclaimer, but I'm going to say the disclaimer now because it came to my mind. I don't speak today as an expert of balance. In fact, anything that you learn today from me is from my struggles with the issue. Not because I'm got some award for being the most balanced person when it comes to activism. No, I struggle with working too much. I struggle with not being the best son, not being the best husband, not being the best father, not being the best friend, imbalance in trying to do things that I think are so important, for the community or else. And so a lot of this is things that I have learned, things that I struggle with. And so I don't want anybody to think that this is a preachy presentation. This is more of a victim of imbalance when it comes to trying to being active, including in this recent time of trying to support students in the struggle for freeing Palestine. So that was my disclaimer. I think that's important. One of the things that happens is when you're not balanced in dealing with activism, trust starts to break down with people. It happened on my campus. And as I learned more about the Palestinian community, I saw it also happening in the Palestinian community of, the way that some people talk about the old movement of the PLO. One group is considered a sellout. They're not really for saving Palestine or free Palestine. They just sold out to Israel, and they're doing this. And so there's tension between parties who are under occupation. Is this the right way to free ourselves? I don't trust you anymore. Your method of trying to free us is, we don't trust you anymore. We're done with you. it was happening on my campus, of the communities that were trying to, the students who were trying to come together to support Palestine. There was a lot of tension. What should we do? You shouldn't do this. This is hurting the cause. Why did you say that? And people started to leave. Well, I could go help Palestine at some other protests. I could go help Palestine somewhere else. And the imbalance that I saw, that I witnessed, was causing movements to break down. People were losing trust. People were separating. And I don't want people to think that I'm judging them, because I see this as, I have two stories that I'll share with you. One is Prophet Musa and his brother Harun. May Allah be pleased with them. And Prophet Musa goes up to the mountain to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Harun is in charge of the community, and the community starts just going off, committing haram acts, and Harun didn't know what to do, right? He's like, oh man, what do I do? And Musa comes back, and he's like so mad at him, and he grabs his beard, and he's just like so frustrated. And he's like, how could you let this happen? Right? I mean, I think everybody knows the story. Harun was so worried about the community splitting that he made a decision that unity was more important than him trying to enforce the laws, even up into including shirk. That's how important unity was, or his understanding of unity. And that angered Musa, but he made a decision. But I'm saying these are two prophets. These are two prophets going at each other about, did we do the right thing in this situation? What about students on a campus? What about regular people in a masjid, right? Another one is when Ali, after Uthman was assassinated, and I don't have time to go into the details. I only have 5 minutes left, but Aisha wanted to go and get justice or revenge on the people who just killed Uthman, and Ali was like, no, it's getting out of control. It's too much fitna in the community. We're going to stop this. And so they were, this is Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. This is Ali, a family member of the Prophet. And now they're going at each other in their activism, So if that's an issue with two family members of the Prophet, what about us? So when I say that we have these issues, it's not to say, oh, we don't have enough iman, we're not close enough to the Quran, we're not following the Sunnah of Rasulullah. No, I'm not saying any of that. I'm just highlighting that these are things that manifest themselves with the stress of activism. We talked about, you could get arrested, you could get killed, you could get tortured, you could get fined, you could get canceled, all of that. Your cause seems hopeless. You're dealing with all of that. It's difficult. It's difficult. So I think we need to bring a little bit of grace into the movements that we're involved with, and have mercy on one another, and think about the difference between representing a group of people versus getting a group of people to support your efforts. There's a big difference, in my opinion, right? When you represent a group of people and you want to be an activist, there's a certain amount of accountability that you have, and hopefully that group holds you accountable. When you're the one who initiates it, because you're just the first one out there, you're most passionate about it, you're just a go-getter, and then you start using your gift of speech, or sometimes using religious arguments to get people behind you, and so now they're just supporting you in your efforts. There's a big difference. And I think of activists like I think of elected officials, that we have to choose them wisely, the leaders of activism, right? So Rosa Parks was not just a random person that sat on a bus. Rosa Parks was a product of a group of people coming together, of African Americans, saying, who is the best one to do this act of activism? Somebody who's not going to go off on a driver, start cursing them out, push them, someone that has demeanor, they have class and etiquette, and they're firm, they're calm. Who do we have in our community who can step into this role? And they chose her. She was chosen to do that. I think we have to be more mindful about who we put up in our communities as the leaders of activism, people who we want to follow, people who are kind of like, they're not the imam necessarily, but they're the one who's like, we're following and supporting this person. They represent us, they represent our voice, and we're going to move forward with that. So I think that's another layer that we need to think about. I wanted to leave you also with a proverb of, some people say it's an African proverb. I've heard it from other cultures as well. If you want to go fast, you should go alone. If you want to go far, you should go together. And this is just a heavy message that, yes, it's easier to do things alone. You know, it's easy to send a letter to the president of the university. It's easy to set up a meeting with this person or that person. But if it's just one or two people doing it because they can, or because they write good letters, or because they had a relationship with the president, it's not going to be as impactful unless you do the work to build a community, unless you do the work to do community development, to assemble power. Power comes in numbers, not just strong arguments, but that you have a large group of people that are organized, that are dedicated. And so we also have to put the work into building a community of activists that can go out there. So I encourage you, in my last minute with you, I just want to encourage you to reflect on some of the things that I've said. Think about how we can work on ourselves first, to put on our mask. And I speak to myself first, of trying to ground myself to be a better husband, to be a better father, to be a better son, so that I don't bring in that anxiety, that frustration, that tension from my own life into this world of activists, and end up hurting other people and breaking down a movement, and we're falling apart as we try to help ourselves or help the people of Palestine. And so if we work on ourselves and still try to support these efforts, I think it will go a long way. And inshallah, you've benefited from something in my 20-minute presentation. And I ask Allah to forgive me if I said anything that was hurtful. And please correct me in the Q&A section. And I look forward to talking to you at the end. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Salam. May Allah reward you. Thank you for this valuable advice from a very important perspective. I'm very hopeful that many of our viewers will have benefited from that. I'd like to remind our viewers that if you'd like to ask a question of any of the speakers, you can post a comment in the comments section, either on Facebook or YouTube, either way that you happen to be watching. Also, I'd like to remind the viewers that this webinar will be available on an ongoing basis on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. So go ahead and store, save this link and pass it on to other, your circle of family and your social circle. Inshallah, now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Sister Sadia Z. Yunus is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an EMDR certified trauma specialist. This is and a relationship and personal development coach, a motivational speaker, and a community leader. She earned her master's degree in marriage and family therapy, summa cum laude, from Hofstra University in New York. She has over 12 years of experience working with individuals, couples, families, and groups, offering online therapy to anyone in the states of New York, Florida, and Michigan. Sister Sadia serves on the board of the Association of Mental Health and Wellness, is chair of the advisory board of the Northwell Family Health Center, and serves on the board of trustees of Huntington Hospital. She is also the co-founder and chair of the Muslim Women of Long Island, as well as a Girl Scout leader. Please welcome Sister Sadia Z. Yunus, who will speak to us on the mental health impacts of this crisis on youth. Sister Sadia.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everyone is doing well. I thank ICNA for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to connect with you all today. It's so absolutely important that we have this talk and we talk about mental health and the impact of all that is going on in Palestine and across the world, and the impact of that on us individually and collectively. And it really is a collective trauma that we have to talk about so many different aspects. And I'm excited that this webinar is covering different aspects of activism, mental health, and the law, and making sure that we're keeping ourselves safe. So I'll give you a little bit of a playbook of what we're going to be going through today so that you can follow along and you know what to expect in this talk. We're going to be going over that self-awareness piece of knowing the impact of these traumatic events on you individually as a person, right? So that self-awareness, self-compassion, self-trust, and the importance of that. And we're also going to be going through some symptoms to be aware of, to watch out for triggers and things like that. And then we're going to be going into why is it so hard to kind of ask for help, to reach out for help, what makes it difficult, what holds us back. And then we're going to be going into how to seek help. So different kinds of strategies, not only where to go for help or healing, but also different strategies to kind of make sure that we're giving ourselves the best foot forward. So just starting off here, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all benefit from the information of this entire webinar. Okay, so self-awareness. It's absolutely key because we've got to know what is the impact of everything that I'm seeing, everything that I'm hearing, the severe trauma that I'm witnessing. I've got to know that impact on me and what it is, first of all. And then what is trauma? When we think about trauma, and as a trauma specialist, I talk about this a lot, that it isn't just the actual event of what occurred. So trauma isn't just the crisis, the genocide that we're seeing and that we're witnessing. It is the experience, the personal experience of the event or of what is happening. So what is trauma to me may not be trauma to you, and it may impact you differently. So why do I say this? It's because we've got to have that lens of compassion for ourselves and for other people. What one person may be experiencing, another may not. And if I'm experiencing severe symptoms and I'm having difficulty sleeping and coping and getting through, it's about having that compassion for myself. Looking at myself with that lens of compassion, that it doesn't mean that anything's flawed in me or wrong or broken, but it means that we're living in extremely trying times. We're living in a time where it absolutely horrific events are occurring, and we're seeing it, right? And we're witnessing it on a daily basis. So it's about not judging whatever symptoms, whatever you're going through, being aware of it, and then giving yourself that permission to reach out for help. So the trauma is the experience of what is occurring and not necessarily the event itself. So the self-awareness, it's essential. How do I know that I'm going through a mental health crisis? How do I know that I need to seek help, that I need to reach out to a therapist? And that comes with that self-awareness. And it's so important as Muslims, as everyone, as, believers in Allah, that we do have that self-awareness, because in that self-awareness, knowing ourselves, we know Allah, because we know our relationship with him and how he sees us and how he views us. And that impacts how we view ourselves. So what do we need to do? I want to give you some action items here. This isn't just a talk that you can listen and get inspired and learn about mental health. All the information is out there, right? And we've been hearing about mental health for a really long time, particularly with the pandemic and after that. And so we know a lot. And so I want to give you some action items. When it comes to self-awareness, you've got to give yourself, when I say you, I'm speaking to myself as well, that we've got to give ourselves moments of quiet, moments of silence. And it's not always easy to do. We've got a billion things on our plates, right? And we're trying to work hard in our personal lives, and we're trying to free Palestine, inshallah. But we've got to take moments in the day to check in, to check in with ourselves, with our minds, with our bodies, with our souls. And I want you to take this question with you because it's a really important question. What am I noticing? And it's a good question to also ask in our relationships with others. What are you noticing? So when you give yourself that quiet and that calm, and maybe, just a few seconds of just stillness, ask yourself that question. What am I noticing? And just listen and be aware. Am I noticing tension in my body? Am I feeling it in my shoulders, right? Shoulders is like the burden of the world. Am I feeling it in my head? That stress and that worry and that tension. Am I feeling it, in my legs? It's being afraid to really move forward in life. Where am I noticing tension? Am I noticing anxiety? And again, anxiety can show up differently for all of us. Heart palpitations, jittery, you can feel jittery, you're, sweaty, all of these other kinds of symptoms. So what am I noticing? So give yourself those moments of stillness and to notice. And when we're talking about the youth, I hope the majority of youth are also listening to this as well. But when we're talking about when we're reaching out to the youth and we're trying to see how they're doing, that's important as well, is that we remind them of these moments of stillness, asking them, hey, what do you notice? Do you notice any tension or distress or worry or overthinking or inability to sleep? Are you noticing these things? So checking in with ourselves and checking in with others. So the self-awareness of the mind, the body, the heart, and the soul, right? Even spiritually. How is all of this impacting me spiritually? How is it impacting my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that his plan is the best plan? That we've got to know that he knows the entire picture. We just know this moment in time. And he knows the entire picture from the moment before creation to the end. And so how is this impacting my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? My trust and belief in dua is being answered. So taking those moments to slow down, to really check in with ourselves, to gain that self-awareness, right? And to listen into that inner voice. We've got to be fully aware of that inner voice and what it's saying. Is it saying negative things? There's so many people who are struggling with their mental health and they're struggling silently. And I don't want any of you to be one of those. And I don't want anyone to be one of those. And so it's for us individually to check in with ourselves, to notice how we're feeling and what our inner voice, is saying to us, and checking in with others as well. Hey, how's your inner voice today? What is your inner voice saying to you? Is it saying negative things about yourself? When you look in the mirror, is it saying, negative, horrible things? And so it's being aware of that inner voice and being able to challenge it with compassion. So that's self-awareness and moving into self-compassion. Self-compassion is giving ourselves grace and understanding and saying, hey, you're going through a really tough time. This world is absolutely insane. And when we look around and see everything that's going on and, people suffering and struggling and our inability to help them, there's helplessness there, and it's going to show up in ourselves. And so, of course, you feel sad, and of course you feel anxious, and of course you're not able to sleep because the images are passing through your mind. And so it gives you, self-compassion gives you and others grace and understanding and empathy and validation and everything we need more of in our relationships and in our ummah. That there's no judgment. It's like, why are you dealing with this? Or I don't know why you're going through this. No, of course you're going through this. It makes complete sense. And so having that compassion for yourself. So what are some of those symptoms and those triggers? And then I'll get into self-trust a bit. So symptoms, I'm going to focus a little bit on the emotions that can come up for us as we're witnessing the atrocities. Number one is grief. Intense, powerful, difficult grief. And this is by witnessing human suffering, by witnessing death, murder, the most horrific things, just witnessing the loss of people and resources and culture and land, it's devastating. And so that sense of grief is what we're all experiencing, but it will show up for us differently. Some of us may experience just breaking down in the middle of the day. You don't even know why. You may feel down and you just want to lay in bed and you don't want to wake up, or you don't want to get up. I hope you want to wake up. And that can also be a symptom that we definitely need to pay attention to and reach out for help. And so understanding that there's intense grief, and how does that show up for you? What part of your body does that show up in? Depression and sadness, right? A lot of times we don't know how to help. We don't know what to do. We feel, again, helpless. And so the feelings of hopelessness can come up for us, and they can even get stronger. And symptoms of, you may have enjoyed things in the past that you just don't enjoy anymore. There's this feeling of, and that takes me to guilt, another feeling of, people are suffering and struggling and they don't have anything and they don't have food. Why am I out here enjoying? And I've heard this, especially from our youth. And I have 2 young adults myself, my children. And so just hearing this, and so many clients that I work with and so many people, it's like, why am I celebrating Eid? Why am I celebrating a birthday? Why am I doing all of this when, people can't even get food? And so these kinds of feelings of guilt, of anger, of fear and anxiety, all of this can come up for us. And it's just about noticing it and recognizing it. And it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It means something wrong happened to you and to the world. And so that's a very uplifting way of looking at mental health, that it's not necessarily something wrong with you, but something wrong happened. You're a human and you've been going through struggles and suffering. And so it's so important to keep that in mind and giving yourself that sense of grace. So all of these are some of the symptoms, some of the emotions that you can deal with. Now, going to our triggers, this would be a whole nother talk. If anybody's interested, you can always reach out to me and ask questions about this, but it's really about understanding how the brain functions, the brain connecting to the nervous system, and the nervous system is nerves all throughout your entire body. And so mental health is not just in your mind at all. It is in your body. It lives in your body. And so it's knowing what are triggers for you and paying attention to how your body responds to that. So we can go into the fight, flight, faint, or freeze mode, right? What is your mode when you are triggered? Do you go into fight mode, like this anger and these outbursts? Do you go into flight mode that you just want to leave, you want to avoid, you want to shut down, you want to numb and just binge watch and just, let everything kind of disappear? Do you freeze, where you feel like you can't even speak and you completely shut down? So what are your ways of, kind of your automatic response to triggers, right? To seeing everything that's going on, not only in Palestine, Congo, all over the world, but also, just seeing, like we did, the protests and what students were going through, and, and then your own personal lives and what's going on there. So knowing and understanding triggers is essential, because then you can work on the part of your body that's responding in that way, right? And some strategies I can give you today are, some breathing techniques that I'd love for you to take with you that will calm and relax the nervous system. So I'll give you 2 breathing techniques, and then 1 technique that will calm and relax the nervous system. And it's research-backed, evidence-based that it works. It comes from EMDR, and I unfortunately can't talk about it so much, even though I could go on for hours about EMDR and how it's so healing and how it heals trauma in the brain and the nervous system and the body, and it's so healing. So one of the breathing techniques is the S breathing, and the other is the V breathing. And so S breathing is what you inhale however you want to inhale, and you exhale with the S sound. And I'll just show you quickly. And obviously a lot longer than that, but you basically exhale with the S sound, and then the V breathing is you exhale with the V breathing. And this is very calming to the nervous system. especially when you're feeling anxious or if you're feeling shut down. Any of these kinds of emotions and experiences that are very human experiences, considering everything that we're witnessing. And so use those breathing techniques and take care of yourself. The other technique that comes from EMDR is bilateral stimulation, and this is 6 to 12 taps crossing the midline of the brain. So right side of the body and left side of the body. I like to do this. Sometimes little kids like to do butterfly taps. You can also just tap your feet. And this is why walking, it can be so healing, because it's crossing that midline of the brain. It's slow, left and right, 6 to 12 taps. So do that when you feel triggered, when you feel upset, when you feel angry, nervous, sad, scared, whatever it is, and that can help you to calm your nervous system. So those are some skills and tools to take with you. So moving on from, we talked about self-awareness, self-compassion, and then we talked about some symptoms and some triggers so that you can be aware and move forward from. The next thing is self-trust. And self-trust is something that is built. Yes, we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100%. We've also got to trust, or we try to, and we work towards it. We've also got to trust ourselves in the sense of, I know what's good for me and what's not. And I know how to set boundaries and when to say no. Dr. Joshua is giving us a great talk about that balance, right? And how important that is. And so I've got to be able to trust myself that I know, and even though I'm working towards it, and we're all working towards that balance, I can give myself permission to say no to things. I can give myself permission to set a boundary that, hey, I would love to go to this protest. I went to one yesterday and I'm feeling, really triggered or really upset or really tired. So I'm going to skip the one today and I'll go to the next one. Right. And that's just an example of a boundary, but it's really about all types of boundaries. Social media is right in our front of our face, right? We're scrolling through and we see these images and we see all of this. And yes, it's a privilege for us to be able to close our phones and put it away and go back to our comfortable lives. Absolutely. It's a privilege. We're not denying that. And yet it's about taking care of ourselves and making sure that we have the capacity and the strength and the ability to go out there and to continue fight for a free Palestine. And we've got to be able to set those boundaries in order to do that, so that we are able to do that. And so giving yourself permission, recognizing the guilt. I'm not saying the guilt is not going to be there. Recognizing that guilt, that it's there and I feel bad and I feel horrible and I wish I could do so much more. And yet I do choose to set this boundary right now and put my phone away, or to not have this conversation, to say, hey, I understand that, this topic is very important to you. It's very important to me as well. I just need a little bit of a break right now. I can't talk about it right now. Right. So whatever boundaries those are, knowing that we've got to give ourselves permission to do that. Okay. And so that part of that self-trust is building that ability to do that and giving ourselves permission to set those boundaries, to say what we need to say no, when we need to. And so self-trust, again, is built, and it's something to focus on and to work on. So the last little thing here as I finish is, why is it so hard to ask for help? And then how to seek help. And then we'll finish here. So why is it so hard to ask for help? That's where that self-awareness is so important and so key, because it's different for every individual. Number one, it could be a fear of vulnerability. I'm going to look weak. People are going to think I'm weak and I can't handle it and I can't deal with this on my own, or I'm complaining. What is your story? What is your story that keeps you from reaching out for help? Because there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. We are humans. We are weak. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we are created weak, and He gave us people. He gave us tools to turn to. And that's the help of Allah. Yes, we make dua. Yes, we read the Quran. Yes, we pray salah. We do as much as we can to reach out for help. And we reach out to the people Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us: mental health professionals, trauma specialists, attorneys, who, family members, friends, community leaders, chaplains, whoever we have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, it's so important that we turn to them and we remove the stigma against mental health, because that's old. That's really old now. We've got to move into, there's absolutely no stigma. It's a normal human experience. We all deal with mental health challenges, and there's nothing wrong for reaching out for help. It is brave, it is courageous, it is choosing yourself and choosing health. And choosing wealth, right? Because when you're emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually healthy, you can do so much more to be financially healthy as well. And so removing that, understanding what's holding you back from reaching out for help, and pushing past it and giving yourself permission. Who can I turn to? Your doctor, trained therapists, mental health professionals. Alhamdulillah, within the Muslim community, we have so many mental health professionals in every single state, in every single country. And so doing a bit of research, reaching out and finding that mental health professional. I highly recommend EMDR. I'm a bit biased, but I've also been in EMDR therapy with my therapist, and alhamdulillah, it's been so incredibly healing. And I really do believe it's Allah's miracle, one of Allah's miracles, to humanity, and really gifts to humanity, to heal trauma, to heal mental health challenges, and to be better, to get better. Who else can you turn to? Friends, family, neighbors, organizations, right? There's so many. There's the helpline, mental health helpline, the suicide hotline, 988. It's so important that we have all of these resources and we know what they are, so that when we need them, we can turn to them. And then ending off with moving past some barriers as well is writing things down. These are some action items, right? Write things down. And so when I say journaling, it's not just writing about your day and writing an essay about what happened. It could be anything that can help you to jot things down, to write down what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with. It's so important that you don't keep that inside. So yes, tell someone, reach out to someone. You are not alone in what you're going through. And so don't keep it inside, because trauma increases and lives and thrives in silence. And so it's so essential to give yourself permission to say it to someone, and also to write things down. Doing the inner work is absolutely essential. Therapy is something that is really essential for each and every one of us, to be in therapy weekly, every other week therapy, so that we're working on ourselves and maintaining our health, our mental health as well, and making sure that everything that is going on in the world, and seeing and witnessing the genocides and all the harm that is being done to our Muslim brothers and sisters, our human brothers and sisters, it's so essential that we're really checking in with ourselves and we're doing that inner work, that making sure that I am asking myself these questions. What has not asking for help cost you? What has not asking for help cost you? What has reinforced your discomfort with asking for help? What beliefs about asking for help are not serving you and need to be re-examined? So these kinds of questions, it's so important for us to check in, to do that inner work, to make sure that we are facing everything that's going on inside of us, in our minds and our bodies and our emotions and our spirits, and we're taking care of ourselves. A lot of times it's a deep down feeling of unworthiness, and I want to tell you that you are inherently worthy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and he says that in the Quran, one of my favorite ayat. He says, indeed, we have created man, and we know what his soul whispers to him, and we're closer to him than his jugular vein. Allah created us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And he knows what our soul whispers to us. The inner voice I was talking about in the very beginning? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in the Quran. And he knows what that inner voice says to us at all times. And he's closer to us than our jugular vein, the vein that our lives depend on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always, always near. And we've got to turn to him, to reach out to him, to ask him for help, and to turn to the people he's given us on this earth as professionals who know what they're doing and who can help us. And there's no shame in that. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help all of us in freeing Palestine, for helping all the people around the world who are suffering and struggling. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in understanding ourselves and in knowing what we need to do in order to be better human beings, to be better servants of Allah, so that we can be of service to humanity. Ameen. Anything I said that was good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that I said that was wrong is from my own self and from the whispers of shaitan. And for that, I ask for your forgiveness and I ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. You can always reach out to me, sadiazyunus.com, for any questions, anything that comes up for you. I'm here for you, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah, Sister Sadia. Thank you so much for that value advice. I think it's very rare that we receive such tangible advice on a methodology for dealing with trauma, the trauma that we're all dealing with as we bear witness to the horrific events that are unfolding in Palestine. And thank you so much. I'd like to remind the viewers that if you have questions for any of the speakers, please post those questions in the comment section of either YouTube or Facebook, depending on where you are watching the webinar. Also, I think that the advice that you're going to be receiving today is valuable advice that you can be sharing with your family and with your social circle. Just bookmark the link that you're watching, and this webinar will be available for future viewing on an ongoing basis. So just a reminder. I'd like now to introduce our third speaker, Sister Amy Doucouré. Amy Doucouré is a graduate of Wayne State University with a degree in English Language Arts. Prior to obtaining her Juris Doctorate from the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, she worked for over 10 years as an educator in the Detroit area. While at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, Mrs. Doucouré was president and one of the founding members of the Muslim Student Lawyers Association. Sister Amy is currently staff attorney at the Michigan chapter of CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. Please welcome Sister Amy Doucouré, who will speak to us on your legal rights in protest. Sister Amy.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a middle of the day in the afternoon on a Saturday. It's for this important webinar. I know I've learned a lot from the other two speakers, and inshallah, I can impart some knowledge on you as well. Like Brother Jim said, I'm going to talk to you today about what are our rights when protesting, kind of where do they come from, and what are some of the legal implications that can happen when police get involved in lawful protests. So the first thing I'd like to say is that the Constitution of the United States, the first 10 amendments, are really where our rights come from. We're going to be talking mostly about our First Amendment right today, which is the right to have freedom of speech and the right to assemble and address our grievances with the government. So that's kind of what we've been seeing going on around campuses all across the country, really all across the world. Really, our youth are coming out and bearing the majority of the work that's being done to push forward issues of ceasefire, divestment from Israel, and really to try to put the issue of the genocide in Palestine kind of front and center in everybody's lives so we can resolve it. So, and they have the right to do that. What a lot of people might not understand is that when we're talking about the government, we're really talking about our universities. Universities, for the most part, are public. They're funded by public funds, and therefore they're government agencies. So gathering at universities is not only traditional, but it's an inherent right. So where can we gather? Like where are we allowed to gather to engage in free speech? You can always gather on public or government-owned property. Those are what we consider to be traditional public forums. So if you're on a sidewalk owned by the government or in the quad of the campus that is a public campus, those are traditional public forums, and you can always gather there. Sometimes, however, universities have the right to put what they call time, place, manner restrictions on speech, meaning that they can sort of put some limits on how you, like when you can use it and how you can use it, and they might actually be able to say that you have to get a permit to use it. So if you're going to be gathering in front of a government building or on government property, you should always check to see if there's a permit requirement. Just because you don't have a permit does not necessarily mean that the protest itself is illegal. But if you have time to get a permit, you should do so if possible. And just because there's an application process for the permit does not mean that they can just deny you a permit. They're not allowed to engage in what they consider to be viewpoint discrimination, meaning they can't deny you a permit because they don't like what you have to say or the way that you're going to say it, or because they have a preference for the other political position that's in opposition of what you're saying. It really has to do with whether or not your demonstration is going to interfere with the standard business operations of the university. And if it's not, then they don't have the discretion to deny you the permit. So requesting a permit and obtaining that is actually a benefit to you, and it should not be a hindrance in having your protest. Public sidewalks are also a really good place to have a protest. They are considered to be a traditional public forum, meaning you could gather on any public sidewalk in the country and start a protest, and you don't need a permit. A permit is never required to protest on a public sidewalk. The only caveat to that is if there are other people like utilizing the sidewalk, walking through, you can't block passage on a public sidewalk, but you can always gather on a public sidewalk without a permit and without permission. So those are good places to hold it. You can always hold protests or demonstrations or rallies on private property, meaning if you have a business owner that will let you use their parking lot, you can do so, or a house, or inside of maybe a structure that's being given to you guys, you can do that. But you always have to have permission to be on private property in order to have to gather or have a protest. So when you're protesting, what is speech, right? So we always talk about freedom of speech, but there's a lot of things that constitute speech. The speech, like the spoken word, like I'm doing right now, that's always considered speech. But other things are considered speech as well. For instance, the written word. So your signs are considered to be speech. So you can't be prohibited from having signs or certain content on your signs, because that's also considered to be a freedom of speech issue. So in t-shirts, what you don't say is also considered to be freedom of speech. So we see a lot of information going on and a lot of calls around campuses for boycotting and divestment from the manufacturers of war, instruments of war, like warplanes and bombs and things like that. That's actually considered to be free speech. Where you spend your money, right? That's also considered to be a speech issue. So all of those are protected. So when you have that means your schools can't condition your enrollment or your funding for your education based on whether or not you're calling for divestment, or whether or not you have yourself, boycotted or divested from certain companies that are, engaging in unethical behavior that we don't agree with. So all of that is considered speech. And there's a lot of misunderstanding right now, and then a lot of it has to do with what's going on in Congress about what types of speech are protected, right? So they're trying to redefine words, redefine phrases to say that they're anti-Semitic or that they're offensive, and as a way to penalize our students for engaging in what is considered by most people to be legitimate speech that criticizes governmental entities, right? So phrases like "from the river to the sea" are trying to be reframed as being problematic or anti-Semitic, or like criticism of Israel is being called anti-Semitic at this time. But there's only one problem with that. Even speech that is unpopular, speech that is offensive, speech that is hateful, quite frankly, for the most part, is considered to be free speech. On college campuses, you can be disciplined through the disciplinary process if you're creating an environment that's hostile to other people. So they can put some limits on speech when it disrupts the learning environment for others. But if you're engaging in a protest on a sidewalk or outside, and you're, even if your language is offensive to some, or it is, unpopular, it's not criminalized. They can never criminalize speech in the United States like they have done in some other places like Canada, for instance. The only types of speech that are not protected in the United States are threats, really real threats, right? If you're threatening somebody with physical harm, great bodily harm, really any kind of threat, and you mean it, like you can't say, oh, I'm gonna if you do that again, I'm going to push you down or whatever, and you're kind of joking, that's not a threat. But like a really real threat, like threatening somebody to commit a crime or an act of violence against them, that's not protected speech. That's why it can be criminalized. Or if you're calling people to imminent criminality. So if you're calling people to engage in criminal activity, that's not protected. But in order to be not protected speech, for calling somebody to criminal activity, it has to be very specific. You have to be specifically calling them to do a criminal act that they can commit, and it has to be like imminent. You can't say like next week we're going to rally and do some criminal activity. No, you have to be like, let's go do this criminal activity right now. That would turn it into speech that's not protected. But other than that, all speech is protected speech when it comes to protesting. So even the speech that other people might not like. So what do we have to do? What can we do during a protest? So during protests, you have the right to march, you have the right to chant, you have the right to gather, you have the right to call for whatever type of action items that you're trying to ask for. You have the right to use amplified sound so long as you're not disturbing the schools conducting their business, meaning you can't disturb classes, you can't disturb offices or meetings, but if you're outside, you can always use amplified sound for the most part, unless you're, disturbing actual business of the campuses. And we've seen around college campuses, especially here in Michigan, where I'm located, where they're using their own tactics to say that students have engaged in disrupting the business of the school. Like, for instance, saying that we have to remove remote because there's too much protesting on campus, so it's disturbing the business. That's not a legitimate disturbance of the necessary business or the normal course of business of the school. Just because there's protesting on campuses, it doesn't mean that it's inherently disruptive to the learning environment. If the students are not blocking entrances, if they're not stopping people from going to class, if they're not disrupting classes. But we've seen schools kind of use that as a way to delegitimize protests to try to get police involvement. And I say that because we have these rights, and everybody talks about how we have these First Amendment rights, but we have to realize is that our rights are never self-actualizing. Like, just because we have them doesn't mean that they're going to come into existence, or they're going to be supported, or they're going to be protected by those people. And the reason that we have all of this body of case law that we practice in as attorneys is because a lot of times people in government are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it's important to know your rights and know how to effectuate your rights. We've seen a lot of police involvement in protests, especially on campuses. We've seen a lot of campus administrators utilize either the campus public safety and police department, or even outside police department, to sort of break up legitimate speech, and that can lead to some problems for students. So what are your rights when you're protesting and the police get involved? So you have that absolute right to video, photograph, and audio record when you're out in public, anything that's happening in the public space. And that includes police officers. If police officers show up to a protest and they're speaking and they're engaging with protesters, you have the right to video record them. You have to do it from a safe distance, and you have to be lawfully present, meaning you can't, like, if you're inside of the building, occupying buildings are not inherently part of free speech. That can be a criminal activity, especially if you had to kind of break and enter to get into that building. So, but if you're on the sidewalk, you're lawfully present there, you have the absolute right to video police. And I will tell you, as an attorney who advises students on a regular basis about their protests, I always say, always photograph and video the police, because what we know is sometimes police don't always tell the truth. And if there's a dispute between what a student is saying or a protester is saying and what the police are saying, the police are going to be given the deference, or they're going to be given the benefit of the doubt because of the position that they hold. But the best way to hold them accountable and to make sure that they are being honest and that they're enforcing your rights and that they're doing their job is to video them. So you have the right to video them, but you also have the right to keep those images on your phone. If you've photographed police or you've video recorded police or other people, for instance, we've caught a lot of people on video doing or saying something that maybe is embarrassing for them or unflattering, but they've done it in public. They can't demand that you remove that from your phone. Not private people and not the police. The police can never demand that you remove images or videos from your phone or even sound from your phone. They're not allowed to do that. And when you have your phone out and you're videoing from a safe distance and you're approached by the police and they ask you to see your phone or hand it over, you don't have to do that either, because it's not a crime to video the police. So you do not have to give them access to your phone. It's really good idea to have your phone with a passcode on it. If you're at protests, it's better to have a passcode on it and not have your biometrics on it. Like, we don't want to be able to use our fingerprint or our face to be able to unlock our phone, because that can lead to the police being able to actually unlock your phone without your consent. But if you make a 4-digit PIN, or even like the little swipe codes that people use sometimes, or a longer password, that's unique to you, and the police can't make you use it, and they can't demand to know it, because you have a privacy right to keep that information because it's unique to you and it's something that you've created. But that's not the same when we're talking about our face or our fingerprint. So you should always, when you're out in public and using at protests, you should always remove any biometric entry from your phone and use a passcode so that you can make sure that police do not enter your phone. So what happens if we're at a protest and law enforcement stops you? So if a police officer approaches you, the Department of Public Safety approaches you, the first thing you should do is be calm. Because sometimes they're not always calm. They're supposed to be calm. They're supposed to de-escalate, but we know that that's not always the truth, and that's not always how it is. So if you remain calm, most of the time they'll remain calm. And ask them if you're free to leave. Ask them, am I being arrested, or can I go? And if they say that you're free to leave, you should just walk away. You have the right to walk away from a police anytime that you're not going to be arrested. If they don't have probable cause to arrest you, you have the right to walk away from them. And if you and you have the right to refuse a consent of your person and your belongings. So if you have a backpack or a purse or your phone even, and they ask you, can I search you? You can say no, absolutely not. You never have to consent to a search. Sometimes police will pat people down to make sure they don't have a weapon if they want to talk to them. And that's a simple pat down. And it's like just like a light touching outside of the clothes. That's not a search, but going in your pockets, going in your purse, going in your backpack, all of that would constitute a search. And that's not a pat down for a gun. And no, they cannot do that. And no, you never have to consent to that. So what happens if we're approached by the police and we ask them if they tell us that we're free to leave and they tell us no? So you have the right, an absolute right to ask, why am I being detained? Why am I being detained? Why am I being arrested? And they have to tell you. And if they don't tell you, you should, take note of that and you bring that up later when you have the chance to talk to their supervisor. And like I said, your legal and constitutional rights are not self-actualizing. Like, we all have heard the phrase, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court of law. Those are legal rights that come from the Constitution, but they're not self-actualizing. And police don't have to tell you, even if they arrest you, they don't have to read you your rights. They only have to read you your rights and tell you what they are if they're going to question you. And a lot of times they're not going to question you. So they're not going to give you your constitutional rights read to you so that you'll continue to talk and engage with them. And then that's considered to be voluntary. So what you need to do if you're approached by police and they tell you you're not free to leave, you tell them, I'm not answering any questions. I'm invoking my right to remain silent. And I want to call an attorney before I have any more conversations with you. Those are the 3 magic phrases. And at that time, the police have to stop talking to you. But it's important, like, sometimes I like to tell kids, you guys always have the right to remain silent. And I tell this to my kids, but you don't always have the ability to do so. But if we're invoking our right to remain silent, we have to actually remain silent, because anything you say after that point, they can still use it, because as long as they haven't asked you any questions. So just because you've said, I have the right to remain silent, it doesn't mean that they can't, if you continue to talk or ask questions, that they can't use it against you. And in fact, if you re-engage with law enforcement after you've told them that you want an attorney, that's considered voluntary because now you've re-engaged them. So invoke your right to remain silent and then actually remain silent. If you're asked to review anything, don't ever sign anything without an attorney. People have signed away their rights to a lot of stuff because they didn't understand what's going on, and you never have to sign any documents that are not reviewed by an attorney. Like I said, officers may pat you down to a check for a weapon, but that's not the same as a search. They have to have probable cause to believe you have evidence of a crime on you to search you. So they don't consent, but they might pat you down. And you have the right, once you're arrested, you have the right to make a private phone call. If you call somebody, if you're calling your attorney, officers cannot listen to that phone call. That is a private phone call. So you definitely have the right to make a private local phone call to your attorney. If we're at protests, one of the best things that organizers for protests or encampments or anything else can do is contact their national chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. Each state has their own chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, and they'll usually send legal observers down to protests, and they'll provide you with the numbers before the protest happens that you can pass out to people so that if there are arrests at protests, the National Lawyers Guild will actually meet people at the jail and get them out. I can tell you here in Michigan, that was instrumental in getting students released within a few hours of being arrested at a protest. So that's very important. If you believe that the officers have violated your rights in any way because they've demanded that you take videos off of your phone, or they've arrested you simply because you're videoing, which we know happens from time to time, or they have engaged in forceful conduct that maybe you think was excessive force or was unnecessary force, the thing you should do is you should write down the details of the incident, including the names and badge numbers of all of the officers that you dealt with as soon as you're able to do so. That way it's fresh in your mind and you have a record of what happened. You should get contact information from witnesses. If you see somebody else being arrested and you think what's happening to that person is not necessarily up to code or really what should be happening, then you can get contact information for witnesses that are also there standing so that you can assist them when they need it. If you're injured at a protest by a police officer, you should definitely take photographs on your phone immediately and document those injuries. And then if you do believe that you have been the victim of police brutality or a civil rights violation, because maybe you were detained unlawfully or arrested unlawfully, you should file a written agency. Every police department, including campus police, have a formal complaint system, and you should follow through with it. And it helps to hold officers accountable. It helps to hold the school accountable, and it helps to create a safer environment for everybody on campus. And so that you can move, forward and on campus with like clear direction and in partnership with your university, as opposed to feeling, kind of oppressed by the police force, because they should be working for you, for your safety, and they're not supposed to be working against you, and holding them accountable by outlining things that they've done wrong in a formal way, in a way where, maybe they could take some action. The university could take some proper action if necessary, is always going to be helpful for that. And I want to talk a little bit about the legal implications of protesting on campus. And there's a difference in status. So the U.S. Constitution protects and guarantees the rights of all persons found inside the United States. It doesn't say citizens, but it says persons, which means you have these freedoms of speech and freedom to remain silent and things like that, no matter what your status is here, whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you're a lawful permanent resident, or whether you're here on a student visa, you have the same rights as U.S. citizens. The difference is if you are a lawful permanent resident, or you're here on a student visa, or even just a visitor visa, and you're engaging in a protest, it can have other legal implications for you when it comes to your immigration status, because especially if you're subjected to disciplinary action through the school. So we need to be a little bit more careful if we have a status other than U.S. citizen when we're engaging in protests. If police come, if it looks like there's arrests being made, those individuals who are not U.S. citizens should probably at that point in time, leave the protest to ensure their legal safety. And this is especially true of student visas. Student visas, I like to tell people that visas give you the right to come to the United States and knock at the door, but it doesn't guarantee you the right to enter. So if you're here on a student visa and you're engaging in protest and you get disciplined, especially if you're expelled or suspended from school, it could put you out of status, which means it might be which means it could put you in removal proceedings. It can make it difficult for you to adjust status later or to find another school to take you, to keep you in status. But it also can mean that if none of that happens, but you were arrested at a protest, or you were disciplined because of your engagement of a protest on campus, if you leave to go home to your home country for like summer vacation or winter break, and then you come back, you might have a more difficult time getting into the United States than necessary, or you might even get turned away at the border. So those are some things that we need to keep in mind. There's also a difference between having illegal conduct where it's criminal in speech and having conduct that might be a violation of student code. And if you violate student codes of conduct at universities, they can engage in disciplinary action, which it could subject you to discipline, suspension, or expulsion from school. And that's regardless of your citizenship status. So those are some things to keep in mind when we're engaging in civil disobedience on campuses. If you're at a protest and the police tell you guys to leave, this is the one thing that is very important. When the police come to disperse protests, that's when people start to not be lawfully present anymore because they consider that a trespass. If you remain after the police have given a dispersal order, then you're no longer lawfully present at the place and you can be trespassed. And this is kind of how we're seeing university students getting in trouble. This is how arrests are made. This is how disciplinary actions are starting, because the police will come to an encampment or protest and they'll give a dispersal order. You don't leave, you get a trespass. And now you find yourself in Michigan, it's a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on how many times you've done it. And you can be subject to disciplinary action at the school. But in order for a protest to be in order for a dispersal notice to be lawful from the police, it has to be specific. It has to be very specific. You must leave this area. You must exit leaving out the east door. You must exit by leaving out the south entrance, or walking towards the parking lot, or walking towards the student building. It has to be very specific. They can't just say you have 3 minutes to leave. It has to be very specific. You have to leave, and they have to provide you a route with which you have to leave. And they have to provide you with a specific time to comply. They can't just come in and say, you have to leave now, and then they start arresting people. They can't do that. They have to say, you have 5 minutes to leave this area. You must leave by the south exit or the south quad, or towards the northeast parking lot, or whatever the specific is. And then they have to actually give you that time to leave. So if you are caught up with a trespassing ticket, and which is why we also video the police, if you're caught up with a trespassing ticket and the order to disperse wasn't lawful, there's a common way that people are able to fight those trespass tickets. So those are kind of what your rights are when you're at a protest, and the protests have come to involve police involvement. How we protest, just remember, you can always protest at a government building. You may need a permit unless there's breaking news, and then you don't need a permit. Public sidewalks, you can always protest. You never need a permit. And you can always protest on private property so long as you have the permission. All speech is protected speech unless it is calling for criminal activity or really real threats against somebody or some institution. Other than that, it's always protected speech, even if other people don't like it, even if it's offensive, even if it's unpopular, it's all protected. If you need a permit on campus to protest, the school cannot deny you a permit to protest because they don't like what you have to say, because that's viewpoint discrimination. So those are your rights to protest and your rights if law enforcement stops you. And so what are some resources? What I gave you is a lot of information. If you go to CARE Michigan's social media page, we have a lot of infographics, one-pagers about this. If you think your rights have been violated, there are a lot of resources out there for you to contact. There's CARE offices in a lot of states, or you can call the CARE national office. The National Lawyers Guild is a really, really good resource for First Amendment rights. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is a really good resource for people, and all of them have information on their social media pages as well. And one of the best ways to ensure that your rights are being protected is if you feel like your rights have not been protected, you file a complaint with the school through their grievance process, their Office of Equity and Inclusion, whichever form that takes. They have a lot of little alphabet acronyms for them. And you can also file a complaint with the Department of Education. If you believe that your university has discriminated against you because of your speech, what you have to say, or they're allowing law enforcement to do something that's creating a hostile environment for the students who are protesting and standing up for Palestine, you can always file a complaint with the Department of Ed. And they've actually opened a lot of complaints in the last 3 months against universities who have not done what is right to protect pro-Palestinian protesters and students on campus. So inshallah, I hope I gave you useful information, and you can use it and take it back and, continue on the great advocacy work that the students are doing, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for the organizers who have invited me here to speak and for putting this amazing panel together. And I think that, Brother Jim said we're going to open up for questions, inshallah, soon.
Okay, thank you, Sister Amy. Jazakumullah khair. That was very informative. You've shared with us a lot of points that we should all be aware of, and I'd like to remind any of the viewers that we're not taking notes that this video will be available on Facebook and YouTube on an ongoing basis, so you can go back and review a lot of those important points. We're now entering the question and answer section of the webinar. And please, if you have questions for the speakers, please post those questions in the comment section of either Facebook or YouTube. I'd like to start out with a question for Sister Amy. Here in New Jersey, a bill has been introduced. It's been introduced in the state Senate, and it was referred to one of the Senate committees, and it just moved through the committee and is coming back to the Senate, I guess for a vote or a second reading or whatever happens next. But this bill adopts the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And what that says is that what is in that definition now becomes legislated as hate speech, here in New Jersey. And from what I understand, a bill like this has actually passed, or executive orders have passed in about 30 states already. So New Jersey is not, in the lead on this. But the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism does call out certain things that you might say about the state of Israel, and designates those things now as hate speech. I was wondering if you could comment on what are the implications of having something specific designated as hate speech.
Sure, that's a great question. Michigan, I think, is one of those states that originally tried to move for that. And that's the Department of Ed is trying to incorporate that definition as well. When it comes to speech itself, even hate speech is protected speech. So that means you can say it. They can impose any criminal liability on it, because all speech is protected speech. Even if it's hateful, even if it's repugnant, even if it's untrue, it's still protected. The legal implications for them doing that is a little bit more nuanced, right? It gives private employers cover. If you post something that they don't like on your social media page, most states, they could terminate you anyways, because speech isn't a protected status for discrimination, but it gives them a little bit more cover if they've defined something that you've said on social media as hate speech. If they want to terminate you, it has a lot to do with what we're doing in our public schools and public universities. If you're engaged, say your university or your high school has adopted a student code of conduct that says that if you engage in hate speech on campus, that you can be disciplined or expelled, and they've defined it as hate speech, then it makes it easier for them to engage in disciplinary action or expulsions for that. So that's really the legal implications of doing that. But as far as being able to attach some criminal offense or liability or to silence that speech, it's not possible with the way our Constitution has been interpreted by the courts, and it's not possible. I know they do that in Canada. That's one of the things Canada did, but that's not something that's possible here in the United States.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that here in New Jersey, at least, if you commit a crime such as assault or vandalism, and that crime includes hate speech, for instance, if the vandalism were graffiti and you spray painted something that constitutes hate speech anywhere, then you've got vandalism plus the hate speech, and that makes it a hate crime, and it actually bumps the severity of the crime up by one notch. So that's something that I don't know. Is that common across the country? I just, follow on question.
Sure. So I think that hate crimes are hate crime enhancements on criminal codes are very, very much common all over the United States. I don't believe that if your only crime is speech, like vandalism, for instance, like vandalism is a crime because you're defacing somebody else's private property, but it also is speech, right? I don't believe that they could enhance it. I don't think you can get a hate crime enhancement for something like that. You can't criminalize the speech alone. The speech is not enough. You have to have an additional conduct in order to get an enhancement, because hate crimes are generally speaking across the board an enhancement on a crime that already existed. Like you targeted somebody for the purpose of committing a crime against them because of some immutable characteristic that they have, right? So if you have a race-based motive for assaulting somebody, for instance, or a religious-based motive for assaulting somebody, and you engage in hate speech while you're doing it, I believe that would be some evidence of your criminal intent, which is always, part of the determination of whether a crime is committed. So I don't think that the speech itself could be criminalized, but if you're engaging in some other criminal activity and you're utilizing language that indicates that you are doing so because of somebody else's immutable characteristic, then yeah, that's very common across the country, honestly.
Okay. And by the way, as long as we're on this topic, I do want to clarify, because I've definitely heard rumors that this IHRA definition of anti-Semitism precludes you from any criticism of Israel, and that is not true. There are very specific things mentioned in this definition, and you can just Google IHRA anti-Semitism definition, and you can see exactly what is there. There are a lot of things that don't have anything to do with Israel that are also defined as anti-Semitism, therefore hate speech. So it's an exercise. There is a question in the comment section that is the burden to prove against police misbehavior or they're not following the procedure entirely upon the complainant? This would be a question for you, Sister Amy, as well.
So if you're using it as a defense against being arrested for a crime or charged with a crime, or as a way to defend yourself against conviction for a crime, then yeah, it's absolutely your burden to prove. And also if you're trying to maybe sue the police department that because of something that they did, then yeah, you have the burden to prove it. Anytime you make an accusation, that's one of the things about our criminal justice system that's supposed to be inherent, or even our justice system. If you make an accusation or a claim against somebody, it's always your burden to prove it. So that's why we say take names, write statements that are when your mind is fresh, and take as many videos as possible and collect videos from other people, because it's always your burden to prove.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Okay, I'm seeing a question that I really frankly don't think anyone here can answer, but I'll post it, and if anyone wants to offer up some thoughts. The question is, why do they deserve this? This is a question, and the follow-on was, Gazans are such great Muslims, they don't deserve this. Would anyone like to try and address this? I know that you can't give a definitive answer, but would anyone like to address this?
I can go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can go ahead. I'm glad you asked that question, right? Because it's something that can really come to our mind as as, you know, they're going through such horrible things. Why do they deserve this? But I want to challenge us all when this comes to mind, right? And to really think with an akhirah, an afterlife mindset. So if we think with the dunya mindset and we just see like this world and, you know, the horrific things that we're going through, yes, they don't deserve that. And nobody deserves this, right? But if we look at it with that akhirah mindset, with that afterlife mindset, we're going to lean on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decision making, right? And he's the one who makes decisions. And it's getting back to trusting in him, that I, as a human being, may not understand why things happen on this earth, but I know that Allah knows all, and he is the most just, and he is the most loving, and he has a plan for every single person, and why people go through things and why others don't. And so I lean on him and I trust on him. So it's turning back to, I do not know and Allah knows, and it's just trusting in that plan. It's also understanding it changes the way that we see struggle and trial. And I work with so many clients in therapy who ask this question, you know, like, why is Allah punishing me? Or why is this happening? And, you know, I challenge all of us to view it in the sense of like, they are tests and trials and struggles, right? The way that Allah has said that he will give all of us in some way or another. And everybody's tests and trials and struggles are different, but we know that we're going to be facing them. And the way that I tell people to view it as not that punishment, but as that test and that trial and that struggle, that is an invitation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate our status, to raise our ranks. And yes, when we look at the people of Palestine and how, subhanAllah, incredible and amazing and focused on faith that they are, that is how we can view it, that it is a test and a trial and a struggle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, you know, we believe that they're people of paradise, and it's only raising and hiring their ranks even more. So it's definitely a challenge for us to shift from that just human and this life mindset to the spiritual realm and trusting in Allah and his plan.
Jazakumullah khair, sister. Would anyone like to comment on this? Okay. We don't really have any more questions that are on this topic. I would invite any of the speakers who would like to make any additional comments to go ahead and you've got the floor if you'd like. Okay.
I'll just add that the way that you set this up with the legal aspect and the mental health and trauma aspect, I felt was very good. I hope that the audience sees how it all ties together and the importance of it all. And even some of the things that I was saying with Sister Amy, Attorney Amy, is that's a lot to think about in the middle of a chaotic thing, right? Like, oh, what are my rights? And it's important for the people who have been chosen to be out there to be grounded, to be calm, to be mindful of their surroundings, maybe remembering some of the breathing techniques that Sister Sadia talked about. Like, all of it is necessary to kind of be involved in this activist lifestyle. And so I really hope that the people, even if whether they were here, whether they're listening to it on YouTube or Facebook later, try to bring it all together and be a holistic person as you're going out to fight and struggle and protest and be an activist in the cause of Allah and pursuing justice and peace for other human beings. So do your best and also have mercy on yourself, because you are human. I like to, as a person that, you know, encourages people to get counseling, and I do counseling and I've been in counseling. The Prophet couldn't resolve a dispute with his wife, and he went out for counseling. He went out for marriage counseling. And so, and I think it's encouraged in us to kind of seek help. As Sadia said, have mercy on yourself. These are difficult times. You will get stressed out. But when you surround yourself with loving individuals and supportive individuals, it helps you to get through it. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Very, very helpful and comforting words, inshallah. Okay, if we have no further questions, we can wrap up. I'd like to thank the speakers for their contributions to today's discussion. We are grateful for their meaningful discourse, and we are grateful for those who have tuned in to learn more about how to deal with this crisis that our community is facing. As we follow the events in Palestine, at times we may feel hopeless and helpless. This hopelessness can lead to stress and anxiety. We hope that today's session has given you some tools to help you deal with these stresses, inshallah, and we hope that you feel better equipped to help those in your family and social circle navigate the crisis in Palestine. If you'd like to see more webinars like this, please support our efforts by going to icnanj.org/donate. With that, I'd like to close. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان وفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.